On top of a building, Gabriel watches the city. He's a low-ranking guardian angel and his duty is to save people from crashing while texting and driving. He appears in the back seat of their cars and with just a little touch, he makes them stop the vehicle just in time. One day Gabriel sits behind Arj, an aspiring documentarian who does random jobs to survive. Today he's frustrated because he's been turned down for another job and he admits he's close to giving up. After reading the texts, Gabriel touches Arj to make him stop the car, but now he's worried about Arj's mental state. Afterward Arj does some chores for the app task sergeant. First he goes to a popular bakery that has a very long line outside. He's not there to buy anything for himself, he's being paid by someone else to wait in line for them. After 2 hours of waiting, the clerk announces that there are no buns left. Arj calls his client to explain that he won't be charged for the buns but also asks him not to cancel the task, pointing out that he waited 2 hours so he should be paid. Sadly the client cancels the task anyway. Arj gets even more frustrated when he discovers that most of the buns were bought by Jeff, a rich guy who is priority for being an investor. Next he goes to a client's house to do their laundry while a rude kid keeps asking him why he isn't using his college degree. Arj gets so irritated that he starts ranting, telling the kid that he has no future and the American dream is dead. This earns him a bad rating on the app. Other chores include putting together someone's desk and restocking some shelves at a hardware store. As he drives around the city to work, he ends up with a parking ticket. Gabriel never stops watching him. During lunch at the hardware store, Arj is approached by Elena. She is trying to start a labor union to improve the working conditions, but Arj isn't interested because he's just a freelancer. Elena points out that he still deserves better treatment, but Arj thinks that things will never improve. In the evening, Arj bumps into Elena at a food stall and they end up having dinner together. Arj tells her about his dream to be a documentarian and she's very supportive. Gabriel is glad to see that Arj is finally smiling. Afterward Arj goes to a store's parking lot to spend the night in his car. When his father calls, Arj pretends he has an apartment and that he's interested in hearing about his cousin's success. Since he's been having trouble sleeping, he plays a sleep assistant podcast, but it keeps getting interrupted by ads because he can't afford a subscription. Sometime later, angel manager Martha gathers all the guardian angels to hear their stories. Each of them protects people from different things, like tsunamis and accidental falls. One of the angels is in charge of lost souls and shares a very emotional story about teaching a person how to find meaning in life again. That person was very grateful to the angel for his guidance, and Gabriel finds himself craving the same thing. After the meeting, Gabriel asks Martha to give him more meaningful duties. However, Martha tells him it's an extremely difficult job and he isn't ready. Meanwhile, Arj's life continues to be terrible. Sometimes a guard finds him sleeping in the parking lot and Arj has to convince him not to kick him out. Whenever he has to shower, he uses the local gym. A homeless man named Leonard also uses this gym and they often chat when they bump into each other. Gabriel continues to watch him with curiosity. One day Arj is hired by Jeff through the app to clean his garage and does a very quick and efficient job. Jeff promises to give him 5 stars and shares his snacks. He says that he's a very busy guy too, but when he reads his to-do list they're all silly things like getting stuff for his party and finding a shaman. Arj says he could work as an assistant, and Jeff agrees to give him a 1-week trial. As days pass, Arj proves what a reliable worker he can be. He works fast and can come up with alternate solutions for random issues on the spot. No matter what Jeff asks for, Arj is ready to do it. Jeff is extremely pleased with Arj's performance so he hires him properly and gives him a company credit card for expenses. Now Arj can afford to stay in a motel. Sometime later Jeff decides to inform Arj that he has a gun in the house in case of an emergency and tells him the password to the drawer. When Jeff hears that Arj has a date, he lends him a jacket and recommends an affordable restaurant. That evening, Arj and Elena are having a wonderful time together. However, when Arj sees the prices on the menu, he's horrified. It turns out this place only counts as cheap for rich guys like Jeff. Arj doesn't want to look bad in front of Elena so they dine there anyway. When the bill comes Elena says they should split, but Arj volunteers to pay and uses the company credit card. The next day Jeff asks Arj about the dinner bill on the credit card. Arj apologizes and explains what happened, promising he'll pay Jeff back. However, Jeff fires him anyway. Now Arj has to leave the motel, and since he can't find any tasks on the app he has no choice but to sell plasma. Arj ends up throwing up because he feels sick while Jeff is throwing up in a cleansing ritual. That night, Arj falls asleep at a restaurant and a waiter kicks him out. When he goes outside, he discovers that his car has been towed. Seeing Arj's life fall apart, Gabriel decides he's a lost soul who needs his help. He then appears in front of Arj, who obviously freaks out. Gabriel explains he knows everything about Arj and tells him there's a lot to live for. With just one touch, he shows Arj a vision of his future where he works as a delivery driver with awful long shifts and lives with Elena at her mother's house. Eventually the couple gets steady jobs and moves to Texas, but their salaries are still not enough to pay for surgery for their sick dog so they'll have to put the pet down. When they return to reality, Arj yells at Gabriel, saying that the terrible life in that vision is still not something to hope for. Gabriel explains that this isn't usually his job so he isn't sure how to bring hope to people. Arj mentions that he wants a life like Jeff's, So Gabriel decides he must teach him that the rich life isn't as great as people say. He touches Arj and a light takes over his vision. When Arj wakes up, he's inside a car in the store's parking lot. However, it's a very fancy car and he's wearing nice clothes, so when the guard approaches him, he's much nicer and understands that falling asleep was just an accident. The car's computer asks him if he wants to go home and shows him the route. In the morning, Arj arrives at Jeff's house. While he looks around, he's approached by Jeff, who is dressed casually and says he's done with his chores. Arj asks him whose house this is and Jeff says it's Arj's. After Arj finds his own pictures around the house, Gabriel shows up to explain he's exchanged Arj's life for Jeff's. In 1 week, he'll come back to see if Arj has learned a lesson. As days pass, Arj is incredibly happy. He enjoys spending money on whatever he wants, asks Jeff to do all the chores, and having to work is just going to fancy restaurants to make a couple of decisions for the company. If something is broken in the house, Arj easily pays for it and doesn't understand when Gabriel mentions the annoyance of minor inconveniences. Eventually Arj visits Elena, who doesn't know him in this reality. They immediately hit it off and have a date at the same restaurant as last time, but tonight the waitress tells them that their dinner is free. At the end they even kiss, and Gabriel starts to worry about this plan backfiring. At the end of the week, Gabriel asks Arj if he wants to return to his old life and Arj obviously says no. When Arj worries that Gabriel will force him to go back, Gabriel has to admit he doesn't have the power to do so. He can only make things normal again if Arj consents. That night Gabriel tells Martha what he did and she freaks out, revealing that Gabriel was originally supposed to help Elena. She orders him to convince Arj to go back and takes Gabriel's wings as punishment. The next day, Arj is having a pool party. Gabriel shows up and says this isn't fair to Jeff as he touches him to make him remember everything. Jeff freaks out for a few seconds before passing out from the shock. The guests think Jeff is dead and immediately leave. Moments later Jeff is asking Arj for his life back and promises him to pay him $200,000 as thanks. Arj points out that Jeff spends that just on one watch and calls him a cheapskate. An argument ensues and Gabriel has to interrupt them to explain that Jeff won't remember anything when they change back because this is Arj's experience. After arguing some more, Arj agrees to switch back but only if he gets a few more days to have fun first. Jeff takes the deal and says he's capable of living well again because it's just a matter of working hard. Since Gabriel lost his wings, he needs a place to stay and asks Jeff to be his roommate. They end up sharing a bed in a motel room and Jeff has questions about angels. Gabriel explains that he couldn't fly because his wings were too small, only higher ranked angels have bigger wings. The next morning the motel manager tells them they need to go. Jeff convinces her to let them stay another day and promises to bring the money in the evening. Now Jeff has no choice but to start taking delivery requests from an app while Gabriel follows him around. Soon Jeff realizes how difficult it is to be poor, clients treat him badly and don't tip well, they also blame him for mistakes on the orders that were actually caused by the restaurant. He's always in a hurry and other drivers get mad at him for causing traffic problems. To make matters worse, many restaurants have replaced delivery boys with robots. At the end of the day, Jeff is furious to discover that the app pays at the end of the week and they can't afford the motel, so the duo has to sleep in the car. Meanwhile Arj invites Elena to come to Paris with him, but she turns him down because she has some work to do for the labor union. Arj complains and Elena gets upset, explaining that he may be rich but she's still an employee and has to fight for the quality of her life. Since Arj doesn't seem to understand, she leaves. Feeling very depressed, Arj goes for a ride and starts texting while driving, which causes an accident that leaves him in a coma. Soon Gabriel hears the news from a colleague and informs Jeff that he'll have to be poor for a few more days since Arj can't consent while in a coma. Jeff freaks out and convinces Gabriel he should ask other angels for help. Later Gabriel goes to Martha, who decides that this is too big a mess and fires Gabriel. He'll have to live like a human, although Martha will reconsider making him an angel again if Arj agrees to make things normal again. Gabriel's body immediately starts changing. He can feel his skin sweating and something funny in his stomach. Afterward Jeff takes Gabriel to a fast food restaurant. Gabriel has never eaten before so he has lots of questions, like how he's supposed to know when he's done chewing. When he finally eats, he's immediately amazed by all the different flavors. He also admits he's scared, so Jeff assures him that he has a plan. The next day Jeff decides to visit one of his companies, hoping he can offer new ideas that will get him a job. However, he's kicked out without being heard. 3 weeks later, Jeff has applied for hundreds of jobs and yet not a single company has called him back. Meanwhile Gabriel has become addicted to the internet, so Jeff decides he must get a job too. Soon Gabriel finds himself washing dishes in a restaurant. When he finally gets his first check, he freaks out because the government takes a big part of it and what's left isn't enough to live. His co-worker Felipe tells him he needs a second job and confesses he has 3. Gabriel is baffled since he doesn't have time for a second job or to do things for himself. At the hospital, Arj finally wakes up and the nurse tells him that Jeff and Gabriel checked on him several times. Refusing to go back to his old life, Arj asks the nurse for some details about coma side effects. That night Jeff gets a delivery request for his old home and he gets happy because he realizes Arj is awake. When Jeff arrives, Arj pretends he doesn't recognize him and says he has amnesia because of the accident. He even gives him a pamphlet as proof. In the evening, Jeff drops the news on Gabriel, who is hating human life so much that he started to smoke. Jeff keeps asking for help and Gabriel gets an idea. Originally he was supposed to help Elena, so perhaps if he guides her to the right path now, Arj will be affected as well. The following day in the break room of the hardware store, an employee is tired of Elena insisting they need a union. Elena doesn't give up and gives a speech about doing the right thing. Gabriel suddenly appears and supports everything she says, also offering some inspiring words. However, when they realize he doesn't work there, the guards kick him out. Later the employees finally vote for unionization, but sadly most of them are against the idea. Gabriel watches how sad Elena is on the bus and decides to get drunk. Felipe finds him drinking on the street and decides to cheer him up by taking him to a club. While having fun on the dancing floor, Gabriel bumps into one of the drivers he saved in the past, and Felipe explains she's his wife. Seeing the happy couple makes Gabriel realize that his job does matter. In the meantime, Jeff receives a message from the delivery app. Next week they'll be shifting to primarily robot deliveries and Jeff's rating doesn't meet their standards, so his account is terminated. Jeff furiously starts cursing and when Gabriel arrives, he goes on a rant about the system. He can't understand how people aren't depressed all the time and finally realizes how messed up the system is. The moment is interrupted by the police, who tow his car because of all the unpaid tickets. Desperate for money, Jeff decides to go to his house to get his watches. Arj is having a birthday party on Jeff's birthday date and even dances using Jeff's routine. While Jeff hides, Gabriel starts getting worried when he notices that Arj's dad and Leonard are also here, not looking poor anymore. Elena is a waitress for the catering service and Arj tries to talk to her, but she says she has to work and ignores him. At the balcony, Leonard finds Arj looking very sad. Arj explains that Elena doesn't want him because he's rich and he feels bad for having stolen all this. Leonard points out that all fancy people stole stuff to become rich and says that Arj is different because he bought an apartment, food, and new clothes for Leonard. Rich people usually don't even talk to the poor. Meanwhile, Gabriel eats some chocolates without knowing they're filled with Mary Jane. He feels very funny and chats with a woman until he falls asleep. After the party is over, Arj convinces Elena to dance with him. Then Elena says she should have gone to Paris with him because fighting was pointless. She lost her apartment and is now sleeping in her cousin's car. Yet she refuses to go to Paris with him now because she's too aware of how badly things are for her people. Once the apartment is mostly empty, Jeff comes out and opens the drawer with the expensive watches because the password is the same. After taking the watches, Jeff tries to leave, but Arj sees him and panics, so he opens fire. Jeff cries in pain because a bullet hit his arm and Arj checks on him, saying this is what Jeff told him to do with the gun. That makes Jeff realize that Arj has been faking the amnesia. The next day at the hospital, Arj apologizes to Jeff and asks Gabriel to change their lives back. However, Gabriel explains that if Arj really meant it, it would have already happened. Arj only wants the exchange because he feels guilty, not because he thinks his life is worth living, and that doesn't count. Jeff thinks it's stupid because nobody would be excited about being poor. Until they think of another solution, Arj tells Gabriel and Jeff to stay in the fancy house with him. The three men get to relax and have fun together. Soon Martha shows up to check on Gabriel, who says he doesn't understand how he's supposed to give hope to humans if their lives are awful. Martha explains that a lost soul doesn't need an angel, they need another person. Gabriel doesn't understand, but Martha disappears without another word. Later the guys go out for some tacos and Arj is surprised to see Elena. She tells him that she and her coworkers are making plans to try to fight for the union again. Elena has learnt that change doesn't happen overnight, so she needs to keep on fighting through the losses. When she asks for a place to have fun, Gabriel takes everyone to the club. After dancing for a while, Gabriel is still sad about being a failure and goes to sit outside. Arj comes to comfort him and says he can't give up, so Gabriel points out that Arj gave up too and their situations are the same. They have no future and no place to live. However, he also admits that being human taught him lots of enjoyable things, like eating, dancing, and making friends. Arj realizes that all the friends he has as a rich person are fake and misses the times he used to spend with his family, who love him for who he is. He says Gabriel is the best angel he could have gotten and confesses that he wants a future that he's built with his own hands and wasn't stolen. This means he's finally accepted that life is worth living. Gabriel smiles and touches his shoulder. When Arj blinks, he finds himself back on the night that his car gets towed. The employee from the restaurant feels bad for him and offers him a ride. Meanwhile, Jeff feels lonely in the big house. In the morning, he finds the parking tickets that Arj got while working for him. Eventually Arj tries to get his car and discovers that Jeff has already paid all his debt. Then Arj calls his dad and finally tells him the truth about his situation. His father is very supportive and reveals that his cousin was caught evading taxes. The next time Jeff goes to a company meeting, he announces they're improving the salary and benefits of the app workers. He refuses to keep using robots or AI anymore, and if anyone doesn't like his decisions, he'll fire them. Later Arj gets a delivery driver job like in Gabriel's vision. However, he doesn't want to have that awful future, so he announces he's quitting with a message on the whiteboard. The other workers are inspired and choose to do the same. Then Arj starts working on a documentary about gig workers and continues to date Elena. One night after they have tacos, he leaves one on the table for Gabriel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.